In this episode, I speak with Victor about a recent initiative hosted at Cal Poly Pomona called A Day in the Life of an IRS Agent. Designed to give students a hands-on look into forensic accounting and criminal investigations, the program helps bridge the gap between textbook learning and real-world fraud examination. Victor will share insights into how initiatives like this one not only spark interest in anti-fraud careers, but also foster mentorship, encourage ethical standards, and create meaningful networking opportunities for the next generation of professionals.
Now is your time to blaze the trail in the fight against fraud. Join the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners in Nashville, Tennessee, or virtually for the 36th Annual ACFE Global Fraud Conference, June 22nd through the 27th, 2025. Choose from more than 90 expert-led sessions, earn up to 40 CPE credits, and build lasting connections at one of many unique networking opportunities. This is your chance to learn the latest techniques in fraud prevention and investigation, stay ahead of emerging trends, and advance your career. Register today at fraudconference.com/fraud talk.
Hello, and welcome to Fraud Talk, the ACFE's monthly podcast. I'm Rihanna Scoggins, the content manager for the ACFE, and today I'm joined by Victor Cardona, the forensic thinker, currently Senior Vice President, BSA Officer, and Head of Anti-Money Laundering at Golden State Bank. He's also an adjunct professor of forensic accounting at California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. Victor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
We are going to talk a bit about an initiative happening at Cal Poly called Day in the Life of an IRS Agent. To get us started, can you sort of give us some background on what that is, what it looks like, and where the idea came from?
Yeah, really the day in life of a special agent, really the Citizens Academy, as IRS Criminal Investigation calls it. It's part of their community-oriented outreach program. And this one is really geared more towards, recruitment and awareness and whatnot. But it's really a way for IRS Criminal Investigations to really get the message out there who IRS Criminal Investigations really is. So that is really stood up really by IRS Criminal Investigations as part of their public outreach, especially from a recruitment perspective.
What does that look like? Say I'm a student, what would that day look like? What could I expect to sort of learn and experience throughout the program?
Yeah, so it's a full day event, and essentially from soup to nuts, what it really looks like, right, is the students will come in the morning, meet and greet. This is who the IRS Criminal Investigation team is. We have the special agent in charge of the SAC that is there to open up the event with myself. And really, we start the day with a quote-unquote swearing in from the special agent in charge. Again, raise your right hand. You do, and kind of go through the full gamut of being sworn in as a special agent for the day. Really, that's the tone all day of that hands-on learning perspective, that first-hand experience. And the students really go through the full gamut of what it really is like. To a certain extent, obviously, it's not like the TV shows where they can get a case at the beginning of the hour, and then within 30 minutes to an hour, everything is completed. So not quite like that, but the students get exposed to a little bit of everything to a certain extent of what it's really like in the life of an IRS criminal investigation special agent. So after being sworn in, they really jump into the role-playing aspect. They will hear certain typologies or schemes or case studies really on a specific case. Then there's some special agents that also role-play, could be the suspect or the victims or the individuals involved in a case. And they follow that case all the way throughout the day. So they may, quote unquote, interview or interrogate certain suspects of a crime. Then they may go into more of the actual financial analysis, a forensic accounting perspective. Maybe they do review a balance sheet or an income statement or statements of cash flow, a bank statement. So they really go through the financial analysis piece as well to truly follow the money. as IRA criminal investigation does as part of their investigation. Then they really present a case to really a quote unquote assistant U.S. attorney or the judge lay it all out. But also mixed in there, I think this is kind of where some of the students get exposed to some of the interesting aspects. So, for example, they may go out into the quad to perform some surveillance of the individuals going on, taking part in the undercover operation. And then there's a certain part of the Citizens Academy, the Student Citizens Academy, where they actually put on the tactical gear, the bulletproof vest, they'll put on the handcuffs, they'll put on the rubber gloves, and they really go through the rubber gun, I should say, and they really go through the rep and control technique. They'll go through the process of how to talk to someone, read them their Miranda rights, and really go through arresting somebody as part of the case. So again, as you can see, as you can hear, it's really the full introduction of what a life in a special agent really could be.
Wow, that's awesome. I know that as a student, I would have loved that. We had a lot of, good workshops on pivot tables and VLOOKUPs and things, but something like this would have been, it would have grabbed my attention at an earlier age. I can definitely say that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and really, this really stems from myself having been in, obviously outside of academia, teaching forensic accounting. I'm also the head of anti-money laundering speaking at multiple conferences and training. Having a strong relationship with law enforcement, having a public-private partnership framework around it. So having IRS criminal investigations come into Cal Poly Pomona and provide this type of hands-on training is just all part of that outreach public-private partnership framework that the IRS criminal investigations unit really does. Great aspect.
More on that aspect. Why are programs like this IRS campus visit so vital for both students and the general public?
I think overall for the students, right, it definitely bridges the gap of really theoretical knowledge and then practical application, right? I think for a lot of accounting students, yes, we know the magic formula for a balance sheet, what it looks like for an income statement, the statements of cash flow, how it all works together. Okay, we get that. We understand that. We understand the theoretical application of it, but now how do we actually put that into practice? We're actually looking at a balance sheet, income statement, some type of financials as part of a criminal investigation. What does that really mean? What does it tell us? Yes, they may have misappropriated this, misitemized it. Okay, great. But now when we're putting on the criminal investigation hat, what does that mean from perhaps an occupational fraud perspective, overall fraud perspective, and then segueing into other schemes such as money laundering, terrorist financing? What is that money flow really telling us? Paint the picture, right? So that's why it really does help the students from that perspective of taking theoretical and actually applying that practically during some of the case in the investigation and the example. But taking a step back, just an overall perspective of the community, it's just overall awareness of who IRS criminal investigations is, their purpose, their role in safeguarding the financial system. So that's really the two-prong approach, if you will, of why it's so important to have this kind of outreach for the students and the general public.
Speaking a bit more on the student side, what specific benefits are you seeing for younger individuals, these college students? What are they gaining from hearing directly from professionals in the fraud and investigative fields?
Well, Cal Poly Pomona has this motto that learn by doing. So one of the great things that Cal Poly Pomona prides itself on is having a lot beyond the VIP IRS Criminal Investigation Citizens Academy. Cal Poly Pomona rolls out a lot of different workshops, events, lunch and learns and whatnot to really learn by doing, because it's really a hands-on approach. I think we all can really read a press release, read a textbook, and understand it in theory, but to really learn by doing, actually being involved in a workshop, hands-on workshop, that's where the added value really comes in. So from that perspective, the students are really being thrown into the pit, if you will, like just being thrown into, okay, everything you learned in the classroom, everything that Professor Cardona taught you in forensic accounting, or here you go, this is part of the criminal investigation case, whatever the fraud, whatever the specified unlawful activity may have been, like going into money laundering, what are the financials telling you? Follow the money. So taking that learn by doing approach, workshop, framework, that's really exposing the students to a quasi internship, hands-on learning opportunity, really.
Absolutely. So, a bit more about that hands-on learning and getting them a bit more out of the textbook and into the real world. What type of interactive activities, like simulations, case studies, group exercises, do you see best capture the attention of younger audiences? How do we meet the next generation where they are?
Well, I think overall, and again, I have two kids as well. My son's moving on to college, and my daughter is 13 gone, 18. So I'm definitely trying to always, find interesting ways to connect with the youth and keep them engaged, right? And I think this Citizens Academy is another aspect of introducing, the hands-on learn by doing framework to the students, because as I shared earlier, going through the full gamut of the different role-playing segments of the day in the life of a special agent, I think IRA Criminal Investigations has done a great job of having proper building blocks. So what I mean by that is, as I said earlier, setting the tone, being sworn in, well, that's kind of interesting from a student's perspective. Then the next block or the next step is really talking to a potential suspect or a victim to get more case information. Well, that's kind of interesting. O class, student, special investigators, criminal investigators, special agents for the day. Here are the financials now. Everything that they verbally told you, everything that you heard. Now here are the financials. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Then after they're done with the financials, hey, class, special agent, let's go out into the quad and perform some surveillance. Well, that's actually pretty fun and interesting. Oh, guess what? Now that you have the suspect, the criminal per se, now we're going to put on the bulletproof vest. We're going to put on the rubber gun. We're going to put on the handcuffs. Now we're going to go learn how to arrest somebody. Well, that's pretty interesting. And then to bring it really home of presenting all of the facts, all of the information to an assistant U.S. attorney or a judge for case completion. So really, each step of that hands-on experience is really a building block of being exposed to, I don't want to say fun, but I guarantee you a lot of the special agents that you talk to, it's about the mission, and they find great pride and reward in their work. And I think by doing the little hands-on workshop pieces of that full day event, definitely exposes them to the broader part of the great rewarding work that it would be to work for IRA Criminal Investigation.
I think it's very clear how engaging this sort of program, role-playing, educational thing can be for students. Should more educational programs incorporate this type of role-playing or hands-on digital forensic work to drive engagement?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100% without a shadow of a doubt. And like I said, Cal Poly Pomona does a great job beyond the Citizens Academy of rolling out these workshops. And again, it just really gives the students an opportunity, instead of watching a webinar, or again, very, very important to still do the training, continuing education training, webinars, seminars, events, but just to say, okay, class, roll up your sleeves, it's hands-on time, right? That's really the biggest part that I feel that universities can do a great job of really introducing that practicality of learning once they've already had that theoretical application, right? So really bringing both together for this type of workshop, 100%, I wish more universities really did something like this.
In addition to the great experience that students are getting going through this day, right? How can these interactions with IRS agents and, other fraud professionals open doors for students for, things like internships or mentorships or, future job prospects?
Oh yeah, I mean, really all the above, and you really hit the nail on the head of saying it, right? It's just the networking and mentorship. And Cal Poly Pomona, we are a member of the ACFE Anti-Fraud Educational Program. So the fact that I also promote to continue that type of networking with the CFE and the chapters, that's what it's also about, because obviously there's hiring freezes. Certain law enforcement agencies may or may not be hiring, whatever it may be, but nonetheless, to still continue on that networking and that mentorship. There may be a class project, an essay. For example, I give a money laundering essay at the end of the class as part of their final exam. And maybe through one of the workshops with our criminal investigations, maybe they just meet somebody and maybe they ping them to say, hey, Special Agent so-and-so, I'm working on the final for my forensic accounting class, with Professor Cardona. Can I pick your brain? 100% of the time, I guarantee you, law enforcement in general, especially our criminal investigations, will take the time and help the students, because again, that is all about giving back, about the mentoring and the networking and the connections. So it's really just about continuing and fostering that growth for the student.
Networking is, I believe that we're seeing how important it is even more so with our, hybrid and remote work. There's more competition in the market, and networking, especially, early in your career, is so vital and so important.
Absolutely. And that's actually I was going to just share, that's actually the success story of how I got this position as an adjunct professor of forensic accounting. But it just so happens that years ago, one of the special agent friends of mine was doing a joint presentation with me at an ACFE Inland Empire chapter event. And it just so happens that then the professor of forensic accounting at Cal Poly Pomona had some of her forensic accounting students in the audience. And after the ACFE chapter event, she came up to me with some of her students, and we really started discussing forensic accounting, fraud, money laundering, terror financing. And pretty much 5 years later, here I am still teaching part-time forensic accounting. So again, that is another perfect example that you never know, by continuing the networking and the engagement, never know what can come from it.
That's amazing. That is that anti-fraud community in action, and it's just so wonderful to see.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So after the day, right after the presentations and going through the arrests, how can universities or student organizations keep that momentum going? What do you suggest to anyone maybe listening who's looking at doing something similar to this and, moving past just the day?
Oh yeah, I mean, even back when I was in school, whether it was at junior college or for my undergrad or even for graduate school, student associations, meet the firms, this kind of workshop, that kind of workshop. The end of the day, a lot of different firms, law enforcement agencies, again, public or private, are willing to come in and really provide some kind of session, workshop, training, just to get the message across. So especially from our criminal investigation perspective, outside of this workshop, IRS, I know from a nationwide perspective, is very engaged, just like a lot of other law enforcement agencies are really engaged with a lot of universities to come in from a recruiting or awareness perspective. Again, whether it's meet the firm. But where I'm getting at with this is even outside of those more campus-wide events, maybe I would say for a lot of the different student associations, have them reach out also to law enforcement or the other firms, the private firms, and say, we have a monthly or a quarterly meeting for all the students. Would you be willing to come in and talk about XYZ? 100% of the time, I guarantee you they're going to say yes, absolutely, not a problem. Now, is it in person? Hopefully it is. If not virtual, I understand. But at least that still continues the momentum of staying engaged from an ongoing perspective. So really, again, just goes back to transparency, communication, reaching out, no doubt, somehow, some way, campus-wide workshop, or from an individual student association chapter perspective, that type of engagement and involvement guaranteed is a must.
Definitely. Well, I hope listeners have been taking notes on, your different tips, because I think that there's a lot outside of, the specific IRS angle, but, there's so many different educational opportunities like this out there. You just have to take advantage of them, right?
Absolutely. And again, that's another great example of what ACFE has done from a collegiate or an overall academic research perspective, right? Of really pushing out the whole anti-fraud, again, going back to the anti-fraud educational partnership program, to partner with universities, done such a great job to really push that message out there for the students, the future anti-fraud fighters really of the world.
Outside of the career benefits for students, what are some benefits, or, what happens in broader society if more young professionals, whether they do go into anti-fraud or not, enter the workforce with a solid grasp of fraud prevention and compliance?
I would say the number one added benefit, regardless if they get into forensic accounting, into auditing, into criminal investigations, but really from a forensic accounting and an ACFE perspective, it's really just the promotion of ethical standards. And that's one of the things that I always share with my students. They could be a CFO, a bookkeeper in a restaurant, in a car dealership, a grocery store. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when they're potentially reviewing financials or even not financials, again, going back to one of the aspects that again, not only that I teach, but, to be a CFP also teaches, it talks about those, it educates you on those red flag behavioral characteristics or whatnot, fraud triangle and all that stuff, right? So it really goes back to just promoting those ethical standards, regardless of any industry anybody gets in, because again, they may not necessarily be the CFO, but they may see some red flag indicators that may align with one of the aspects of the fraud triangle. Then when they really start paying attention, wow, the pressure, opportunity, and rationalization really is there. You know what? I think I have something here. I remember taking that forensic accounting class by Professor Cardone, and he also said something about whistleblower hotline or some kind of internal control aspect. You know what? My company does have that to report some kind of red flag indicator of potential fraud or whatnot. So really from that perspective, just getting the message out there to promote the ethical standards that we really need to continue to foster as a society.
Say, you are speaking to a student or a young professional who wants to dive deeper into tax law or, fraud detection. What are next steps that you would tell them to follow?
We everybody, and again, I tell my kids this, I tell my students this, we're all running our own race in life, right? So it doesn't necessarily and my students always age me in class about movie references or quotes, keeping up with the Joneses. They're like, Pastor, what does that really mean? So I got to remind them. But really from that perspective, whether it's continuing on to get a master's degree in accounting, or like myself, an MBA in economic crime and fraud management, or CFE or your CPA, really just to continue moving forward with that networking. And I always introduce the ACFE student membership at the beginning of the class and throughout the class to promote that, because that's another aspect of that networking. that maybe in the back of their mind, they may want to pursue, maybe their LLM or whatnot, or their CPA, or again, their CFE, but having those continued networking opportunities to join a local ACFE chapter, just so that way they get additional guidance or mentorship, or it's in the training that will open up their eyes. So if all else, really some that long-winded answer is do your research to make sure you're entering, you're gonna spend enough effort, time, money, and energy in something that's gonna benefit you in the long run. Because again, you're running your own race.
For sure. I love that sort of self-reflection to decide where am I going, what's going to be best for me, and what I want to do in the long run, right?
Exactly.
So, off of the students and on to universities and other agencies, right? How do you recommend they continue evolving these types of presentations to remain relevant and dynamic for future generations? Is it, changing how they're presenting the topic? Is it, certain topics that we're seeing emerging? What would you say?
I mean, really, yeah, all the above, really, because you always want to make sure that it's engaging for the students, right? I'm sure what was relevant 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, from a student or university perspective is going to be a little bit different today. And that's okay. That just goes to show that we're changing with the time. So definitely to piggyback off of what we were talking about earlier of having the student associations or the universities reach out to the law enforcement agencies or the firms to be a part of Meet the Firms or monthly student organizational meetings. But to stay abreast of the typologies of the schemes, again, bringing it back to anti-fraud and forensic accounting, what are the newer typologies? What are the schemes going on out there? Are we talking about some kind of romance scam? Well, what is there? Well, that's something called pig betraying. It's crypto related. It's romance. Well, what about from a money laundering perspective? Well, we have the professional money launderers. So it's always making sure that the content is always updated and it stays consistent with the times. Really, again, I'm a big believer in always making TV or movie references until my students say, Professor, I don't think we were born then. So I got to kind of update that. But that's exactly what I mean of making sure all of these workshops, all of the training are kept up with time. Because again, we don't want anything that's stale, that's outdated. Yes, older typologies are still relevant, but just keeping up with the time.
Definitely. I think that's speaking, from someone from the ACFE, I can promise you, that's one of the biggest challenges of creating this type of educational content. But it's the most rewarding. And it also challenges you to, keep yourself up to date, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So, Victor, I think that covers all of my questions for you today. Is there anything else you'd like to mention? Anything you'd like to shine a spotlight on before we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, again, thank you. Thank you to ACFE for having me come on here and kind of talk about the great work that I've been doing. Again, not only from a public-private partnership perspective, from the banking piece, but also kind of what we do from an academia perspective. Again, being a partner of ACFE's Anti-Fraud Educational Partnership Program. And the really one main takeaway, and we kind of talked about it really consistently throughout this podcast, was to continue on the networking and the learning. And the number one thing I can say to, regardless if you're a student, if you're an ACFE professional, an anti-fraud professional, to be involved, continue to be involved with your local ACFE chapter, with the webinars, continuing education, the global conference, everything to keep moving forward. So that way you always are staying on top of the latest and I won't say greatest fraud schemes, that at least you're aware of everything going on. So network. Continue on that partnership.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Victor.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. You can find this podcast along with all other episodes of Fraud Talk on acfe.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This has been Rihanna Scoggins, signing off.